When was the last time you spoke to Joe Biden?
I cannot remember when I talked to him.
You haven't spoken to him since before February of 2022?
No, we haven't spoken.
Just got done listening to the Tucker Carlson, Vladimir Putin interview. Very, very interesting. And I'm going to give you a roughly 10-minute rundown of the most important, compelling things said. Putin said that Russia agreed to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 with the belief that it would help usher a better relationship with the West, that they'd be embraced by the Western countries like America and the European Union. But they were greatly disappointed upon the continuation of hostile relations with the West. They wanted to create an international national security organization with the Western countries, but instead the West continued to grow and expand NATO. Putin claimed also that China's purchasing power has outpaced the United States. This took place a long time ago. I don't know if I necessarily believe that because, yes, while China's population is bigger than ours, their consumption base much smaller. China's great desires to be a consumer economy, which the U.S. has been since the 1940s, because that's every government's dream, but they are a producer economy. Very low consumption rate. Putin also claimed that for decades, Russia's been pleading with NATO to stop expanding, stop developing military infrastructure in the surrounding countries around Russia, and even that Russia would have joined NATO if allowed.
Would you have joined NATO?
Look, I asked the question, is it possible or not? And the answer I got was no. If I was insincere in my desire to find out what the leadership position was...
But if he had said yes, would you have joined NATO?
If he had said yes, the process of rapprochement would have commenced, and eventually it might have happened.
If you happen to be interested in the things I'm talking about and want to know more about it, connect with me on Minnect, the app that's absolutely taking the world by storm right now. I spoke to a few guys the other day. One of them was trying to create their own channel, asking, hey, what equipment do I need to buy? What are some of the, maybe not top of the line things for editing and making thumbnails, but some of the, starter stuff, and what kind of speakers do I need to use? How do I look at content? What type of niche do I want to get into? I was through all those trials and tribulations, had a lot of success, even more failure. You learn a lot more from failure. I can save you a lot of time getting your own content started. For a limited time only, I put my prices as low as they could possibly be. $1 a minute. I would love to talk to all you guys all day, any day, because I think the world will be a better place if we're all out there fighting the good fight, creating our own content. Putin claimed that Russia had several agreements with United States presidents that were productive but eventually undercut by the intelligence agencies. Putin claimed that Russia is far beyond the United States in the development of hypersonic missile technology, something we've heard for a long time, but I hope that this is all nonsense, because I can't imagine how the U.S. with its $900 billion military budget is behind Russia with its $65 billion military budget. But remember, you have to keep in mind that you have to take everything that he says with a grain of salt, because he's a highly trained intelligence master of psychology, master of deception, so who knows how much of this is true. Putin claimed that the CIA committed a coup in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, at a time when Ukraine and Russia had a harmonious, productive relationship, and right at that point is when they started to be at odds with each other.
Yet the armed opposition committed a coup in Kiev.
With the backing of whom?
With the backing of CIA, of course.
He also claimed that this CIA-controlled government in Kiev is part of the reason that the Donbass war started in 2014. Putin claimed that the Western countries never in fact intended to abide by the Minsk agreements. The Minsk agreements was an agreement that was intended to stop the fighting between Russia and Ukraine and the Donbass region, but severely failed. Putin also talked about denazification and destroying the legacy of Hitler that carries on to this day, in Ukraine especially. He talked a lot about neo-Nazis. Now here's one that really disappointed me. So Putin said that he has not spoken to Biden since before 2022, before the war started.
What we are conveying to the US leadership: if you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks.
So does that mean that Biden is unwilling to talk to Putin? I mean, wouldn't you think that that'd be your number one priority as president if you're actually trying to end this war? And then Tucker asked Putin, what would it take for you to stop this conflict? And Putin laughed. He said, all it would take is for the U.S. to stop supplying weapons to Ukraine. Tucker asked him if he would send troops to Poland, because that's a big fear that people have. If Ukraine falls, Poland is next in line. But Putin said that he would not attack Poland unless Poland attacked first. Again, take it with a grain of salt, but when asked who bombed the Nord Stream pipeline, Putin laughed and he said, you have to think of who has the intention and who has the capability, and he hinted at the CIA or NATO. And Tucker asked him, if this was done by the CIA or NATO, why not use this towards your propaganda efforts? And Putin chuckled and he said, oh, it's very difficult to beat the U.S. in a propaganda war because they own the majority of media outlets in the Western world. It's basically the majority of the digitalized world. Putin wanted to say that sanctions were a huge mistake for the United States because the dollar is the cornerstone of their global power. And now, as I've spoken about before, huge help for the U.S. to fight against inflation, because when the U.S. prints money, a lot of those dollars go outside the U.S. because there's a demand for dollars outside the U.S. So only roughly 30% of the dollars in creation are actually in the U.S. But if that international demand goes away, those dollars come back home, inflation goes way up. And now, U.S. allies are reducing their dollar reliance. So check this out. In 2022, 80% of Russia trade was done in dollars. Today, only 13% of Russia international trade is done in dollars. Putin claims that the move by the U.S. to put sanctions on Russia did not hurt Russia, but it hurt the U.S. badly because a lot of the top oil-producing countries are now getting off dollar dependence. Putin also said that the Russian international trade use of yuan went from 3% all the way up to 30% between 2022 and today. Putin said that in comparison between the G7 and the BRICS nations, the G7 consisted of 47% of the global economy in 1992. Today, only 30%. In 1992, BRICS had 16% of the global economy share. Today, it has more than BRICS, according to Putin. When speaking about U.S. presidents and the limited impact they have when you really look at it, Putin said that elitists control the policymaking of the U.S., but it's hard to really identify who's doing the decision-making because of how abnormal the U.S. election system is. He also wanted to say that he had a positive relationship with Bush and Trump as presidents, but my main takeaway from this is that unless he's completely BSing, Putin is somebody that could be negotiated with. He just wants to not be surrounded by U.S. military allies with missiles in their country pointed directly at Russia. I mean, would we want Russian missiles put in Mexico or Canada? We'd flip out if that was happening. So shout out to Tucker, because this was an amazing interview, absolutely epic. And anybody who's criticizing him for doing it, very ignorant. You should be willing to speak to anybody in the world, and now we, maybe to some degree, have a much better understanding of Putin and his motivations. Let me know what you think. God bless.